She didn't see me at first. She was too busy kissing him, slow, deliberate, two hands pressed against his chest like they were the only people on earth. It wasn't a drunk kiss. It wasn't a dare. It wasn't just a peck. It was the kind of kiss you give someone you've kissed before. There was music playing, something upbeat and happy, but all I heard was the wind in my ears and the glass in my chest cracking. I could have stood there frozen forever, but my legs moved. I don't remember telling them to. I walked straight toward them. Nobody stopped me. Nobody noticed. The world kept spinning like it wasn't falling apart. The guy saw me first. He stepped back like I was just another party guest looking for the bathroom. Then she turned. Her lipstick was smeared. The exact color I bought her last Christmas. The one she said made her feel dangerous. She blinked like she was confused for a second. Then her eyes went cold. Not guilty. Not sorry. Just blank. Like she had already prepared for this moment and rehearsed it in her head. I opened my mouth, and what came out wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was something worse. It was calm. You just ended our marriage. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, smiled, and said, "You're wrong." And in that moment, I knew something I'd never unknow. This wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was the end of the performance. And I had just stumbled into the final scene. She didn't chase me when I turned around and walked off that rooftop. She didn't call after me, didn't apologize, didn't cry. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me, heels tapping quickly across the patio tiles, her voice strained, saying my name. Nothing. Just silence and muffled music as I made my way to the elevator. Inside the elevator, I stared at my reflection in the metal walls. I looked like a man who had no clue what had just happened to his life. I kept replaying it again and again. The kiss, the look on her face, the smirk when she said I was wrong. I thought maybe she was drunk. Maybe she panicked. Maybe that was her way of trying to deny reality. But no, that look wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was control. She didn't look like she was caught. She looked like she had been expecting me. Back in the car, I sat in the parking lot for half an hour before I could even turn the key. My hands were shaking. I felt like I had just walked in on a stranger wearing my wife's skin. It was like I didn't know her at all, but at the same time, little moments from the past few months started flashing in my head, faster than I could filter them. The canceled weekend trip to Estes Park because of a last-minute deadline. The long showers while her phone was always on Do Not Disturb. The sudden interest in journaling, even though I never once saw her write a single word. The perfume on her scarf that wasn't hers. The 3 times I woke up alone in bed at 3 a.m., only to find her checking emails in the kitchen. I wanted to believe it was just one mistake, a terrible, awful, single lapse in judgment. I wanted to believe she'd say she was sorry and beg me to understand. But my gut told me otherwise. That moment on the rooftop wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. It was public. It was designed to end something. I drove home, numb. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even know what to feel. Just this cold heaviness pressing into my chest like I was wearing a wet coat made of bricks. When I walked into the house, everything looked too normal. Our dog, Franny, wagged her tail. The dishwasher hummed. The living room lamp was still on. Her favorite blanket was draped over the couch. Nothing looked like a marriage had just imploded. And then, I saw her iPad, left on the dining table. Screen still lit. I wasn't proud of what I did next. But I opened it. No passcode. She never used one. She always said, "What do I have to hide?" Apparently, everything. I didn't intend to snoop. I swear. When I first saw the screen glowing on the dining table, I just wanted to turn it off. Save the battery. Keep the house looking normal, like it hadn't just become ground zero. But my finger hesitated above the button, and I glanced down, out of nothing more than instinct, and saw her iMessages were still open. There were no names. Just initials. One thread was with someone saved as C. I already knew who C was. I had just watched him swallow my wife's lips on a rooftop like he'd been doing it for months. I tapped the thread, stomach tight, hands damp. "C, you looked so good in that dress tonight. Wish I could have taken you home. Rochelle, you will soon. Just be patient. He's slow, but not stupid." I read that line 5 times. He's slow, but not stupid. Was that supposed to be about me? Was I the he? Or was I in denial, reading into things too much? I kept scrolling, needing more than just suspicion. And there it was. A week-old message, timestamped 1:42 a.m. when I thought she was in bed next to me, asleep. Rochelle, he still thinks I'm doing late-night reports. I told him I was up worrying about the IVF stuff. He bought it, of course. He wants to believe I'm still trying. There was a moment of complete silence inside me. Not just around me, in me. Like my thoughts stopped. My pulse slowed. I suddenly felt outside my own body, like I was floating above myself, watching some loser read the receipts of his own undoing. And then rage crept in. Not loud, not explosive, just heavy, like my blood had turned into wet sand. I kept scrolling. More texts, more lies, more inside jokes between them about me, about my predictable routines, about how I always cooked on Thursdays, about how pathetically grateful I was every time she initiated anything physical. They laughed about my effort, my patience, my sincerity. There was even a photo. Me, passed out on the couch with the TV on in the background. A shot clearly taken without my knowledge. The caption? While the husband sleeps, the queen makes plans. I slammed the iPad down but didn't break it. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But part of me needed to keep it. Proof. Something real. Something undeniable. Not because I was going to expose her. Not yet. I didn't even know if I could. I just wanted to look at it the next time I tried to convince myself that maybe I misunderstood. Because I wanted to believe it wasn't real. Even with evidence. Even after the rooftop. Some part of me still hoped I'd wake up and it would all be a dream and I'd find her in the kitchen, humming while making coffee, asking if I remembered to take out the trash. But instead, I stood alone in that dimly lit dining room, breathing like I'd just run a marathon, staring at a device that had, within 15 minutes, torn a hole in everything I believed about the last 7 years of my life. And as I stood there in that silence, a single terrifying thought clawed its way to the front of my mind. What if this had never been about the affair at all? What if it was about getting rid of me? I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the edge of the bed, stiff as a corpse, barely breathing. The room was pitch black except for the soft glow of the hallway nightlight. The one she insisted we keep on ever since she read that article about sleepwalking being triggered by absolute darkness. I remember thinking that was a weird excuse at the time, but like everything else now, it felt like a detail I'd been manipulated into accepting. She came home at 1:23 a.m. I heard the garage door, the soft clunk of her keys, her heels dropping near the entryway. She moved through the house like nothing had happened. No panic, no guilt, just smooth, measured steps. I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. I couldn't face her. Not yet. She climbed into bed, rolled toward the wall, and let out a satisfied little sigh, like it had been a good night. I lay there, muscles locked, heartbeat like a ticking clock in my ears. I wanted to scream at her, shake her awake, and throw the iPad in her face. But I didn't. Something in my gut whispered, not yet. Watch. Wait. Listen. The next morning, she was back to her usual routine. Making coffee, playing with the dog, humming like someone who still believed she was untouchable. I stayed quiet, observant. I wasn't myself. I was something else now. Like a shadow in my own life, just watching from the corner of the room. And that's when it hit me. The iPad was just the start. Rochelle kept a shared Dropbox folder on her laptop. It was technically ours, used for home stuff, documents, vacation plans, bills. But I hadn't checked it in ages. She was the organized one. I was the forgetful tech idiot who always asked her where things were. She liked it that way. But this time, I opened it while she was in the shower. I used my phone, just in case. The folder looked normal at first. Same categories, same files. But something felt off. The recent activity showed an edit timestamp from 2 nights ago. And it wasn't for anything financial or personal. It was a subfolder titled, House Transfer Docs, Final Draft. My stomach sank. Inside were PDFs, labeled legal terms I didn't fully understand, but the file name said enough. Quit claim deed. PDF, property ownership modification. PDF, notarized signatures, pending. PDF, there were scanned forms with blank spaces for signatures. My name was typed in already. Pre-filled. She drafted papers to take the house. Behind my back, I felt physically sick. I opened another document. It was a spreadsheet labeled Timeline, Personal/Legal Separation. At first glance, it looked like a project plan from her office, color-coded cells, tasks, dates, progress columns. But the tasks weren't work-related. They were me. April 4th, start distancing emotionally. April 18th, suggest therapy, but don't follow through. May 2nd, begin shifting financial logins. June 10th, secure private P.O. box. June 17th, initiate discovery phase infidelity, frame narrative. June 22nd, involve C in public incident. Make it visible. I froze on that last line. Make it visible. That rooftop kiss wasn't spontaneous. It was staged. It was scheduled. Suddenly, her smug smile, her calmness when I caught her, it all made sense. She wasn't shocked because she wanted to be caught. She had crafted the moment like a final act of a play. I put my phone down. My hands were shaking again. The realization hit me like a slap across the face. She wasn't just cheating. She was building a case. And the story she was writing didn't end with betrayal. It ended with me as the villain. The next morning was worse than the one before. Not because of what I found in the Dropbox folder. Not because of the texts I couldn't unsee. But because she walked into the kitchen like we were fine. Like I hadn't watched her kiss someone else. Like she hadn't plotted out my emotional collapse on a spreadsheet. She wore that same lavender robe I bought her 3 Christmases ago. The one she used to only wear on weekends when we were planning to spend the morning in bed. She was humming, again, some upbeat song from a TV commercial. She poured me coffee without asking, slid it across the counter like a waitress, and said, "You okay? You were kind of quiet last night." I stared at her, dead silent, not blinking. She didn't flinch, didn't even look guilty. Her eyes scanned me like she was reading me for updates, trying to assess how much damage control she'd need to do. I wanted to say it. "You kissed him. You kissed Caleb. You smiled in my face and said I was wrong. You plotted a fake marriage timeline and drafted legal transfers behind my back." But I didn't. Because something inside me, the part of me she hadn't broken yet, whispered one word: leverage. So I said nothing. I blinked, sipped the coffee, and gave her a tired smile. "Just didn't sleep great," I muttered. She watched me. I could tell she didn't expect that. There was the briefest flicker of tension in her jaw, like her brain had to recalculate. Like she'd expected a fight and was thrown off by my compliance. "Long day?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I nodded. She leaned across the counter and said, "I was thinking, maybe we should do something together this weekend. Just us. Something relaxing." My hand clenched under the counter. This was the gaslight phase. I recognized it now. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was testing the limits of how much she could manipulate the story. She needed me on record being okay. Smiling. Participating. Existing beside her without resistance. So that when she made her final move, she could point to this and say, "See? He was fine. We were happy. He never said anything was wrong." And like the idiot she took me for, I played along. "Sure," I said, even softer this time. "That sounds nice." Her entire posture relaxed. She walked around the counter, kissed my cheek, and said, "Good. I think we need a reset." A reset. That word bounced around my skull like a ricochet. As if this was all just a misunderstanding. A little bump in the narrative. Something to be rebranded. But the truth was, I wasn't looking for a reset. I was looking for proof. Later that day, while she was working from home, in the office, door shut, as always, I logged into our shared cloud photo account. I didn't expect much. She wasn't careless with that stuff. But she had recently synced her phone for backup after dropping it last week. I figured maybe, just maybe, something had slipped through the cracks. It had. Buried in the auto-upload folder were bursts of hidden screenshots. Not from her camera roll, but from a private notes app that had been capturing entire messages, plans, lists, even scripts. Yes, scripts. Paragraphs of rehearsed lines for future arguments. Practice scenarios. Potential reactions from me, and how she'd steer them. If he brings up the kiss, deny it first, then pivot to blaming his emotional distance. If he finds the texts, say it was flirtation but nothing physical, insist on couples therapy. If he threatens divorce, cry, say you don't recognize him anymore. Say he's being cruel. She had literally prepared for every possible reaction, every choice, every confrontation, like I was just a stubborn character in a play she'd written, and she was the director determined to hit every beat. But that's the thing about rehearsals. They never prepare you for the moment the actor goes off script. That night, I lay in bed beside her and couldn't stop thinking about the word scripts. How many of our arguments had already been written before I even opened my mouth? How many times had I spoken from pain, only for her to respond with a line she rehearsed in the mirror. She was sleeping like a baby beside me, curled up like a woman with nothing to hide, while my body was rigid and wide awake, feeling like I was trapped in someone else's marriage. I wanted to confront her so badly. Every instinct in me screamed for justice. I had the texts, the timeline, the photos, the legal documents, the scripts, but still, something in my gut said, it's not time. Don't just expose her. Outsmart her. And then, I remembered Allie. She wasn't someone we talked about often, barely at all, really. But I remembered Rochelle mentioning her once, years ago, in passing. A best friend from college. They had a massive falling out. Something dramatic. I only remembered it because Rochelle got weirdly cold when I brought Allie up once, saying something like, "We don't talk anymore. People change. Some friends are better left behind." But that look on her face? It wasn't annoyance. It was fear. I didn't know much, but I knew one thing. People don't write someone completely out of their life unless there's a very good reason. So I found her. It wasn't hard. Social media, even locked down, leaves a trail. I saw a LinkedIn profile, some Instagram tags, an old birthday post from someone in Rochelle's old sorority. Within an hour, I had an email address. I stared at it for a long time. I had no idea what I was about to step into. For all I knew, Allie hated Rochelle for something totally unrelated. Petty drama, jealousy, something old and dead. But then again, maybe not. I wrote something simple, direct, polite, but just cryptic enough to pique curiosity. Subject: I know this is random, but it's about Rochelle. Hi Allie. You don't know me personally, but I think we may have something in common, or at least a shared concern. I'm her husband. I think something is very wrong, and I believe you might be one of the few people who could help me understand. No pressure. Just, if you're willing to talk, I'd really appreciate it. Wendell. I expected silence. Or maybe a one-line "leave me out of it." Instead, I got a response in less than 10 minutes. Wendell. I've been waiting for this email for years. When can we talk? Allie. My heart dropped into my stomach. I gave her my number. She called within the hour. And what she told me next changed the way I looked at my wife forever. Apparently, Rochelle's need to orchestrate reality wasn't new. According to Allie, she'd done this before, with exes, employers, even friends. Allie said Rochelle once faked screenshots to get a girl expelled from their university dorm. Manipulated a boyfriend into signing over a car by convincing him he owed her back pay for emotional labor. She was brilliant, charismatic, calculated. She knows how to tell a story, Allie said, her voice tense. She's always 3 steps ahead. She makes people think they're crazy while she's rearranging the chessboard. I asked her why they stopped being friends. She was quiet for a second, then said something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. She tried to frame me for stealing money from a charity we both volunteered for. Said she had proof. It was all fabricated. I caught her mid-plan, so she torched the friendship and told everyone I was unstable. And they believed her. My throat went dry. That same word again. Proof. Fabricated. Staged. Scripted. Allie paused, then said, Wendell, I don't know what she's planning. But if she's back in the scripting phase, that means she's close to the endgame. You don't want to be around when the curtain drops. I hung up, staring at the ceiling, pulse hammering through my ribs. It wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about getting out before she could write me into the final scene as the villain she needed. The day after I spoke with Allie, I couldn't focus. Every sound in the house felt like a trap door creaking open. I started watching Rochelle the way you'd observe a wild animal in your kitchen, carefully, quietly, trying not to provoke it before figuring out how the hell it got in. She acted normal. Suspiciously normal. Too affectionate, too composed, too smooth. Like she knew the role she was playing and had nailed the audition. I'd already seen the scripts, the stage timelines, the Dropbox folder that made me look like a man falling apart on paper. I had read the text threads with her lover, seen the photos of me taken without consent, and learned from a woman I'd never met that my wife had done things like this before. But none of it prepared me for what I found next. It started with a strange email she received while we were watching TV. She was curled beside me, pretending to care about some baking competition show while secretly scrolling through something on her phone. I caught a glimpse of her lock screen. A notification popped up with the subject line, Draft ready for review. Incident report template. She tilted the phone away fast, too fast, and said, Work stuff. but she never tilted it away from me before. That was new. When she got up to shower, I waited a full minute before walking over and checking her laptop, which she'd left open on the coffee table. I knew the password. She always said, "Why hide things from each other?" The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so sickening. What I found made my skin crawl. There was a document open on her screen, titled, June 2025, Harassment Chronology, Internal Use. I clicked it. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly missed the cursor. It was a timeline. A twisted mirror of the one I found before, except this one didn't track her affair or the transfer of our assets. This one tracked me, or rather, a distorted version of me that didn't exist. Each entry was a lie, neatly typed and time-stamped. April 4th, Wendell verbally aggressive after dinner. No witnesses. April 12th, withheld finances, refused shared access to checking account. May 1st, raised voice during disagreement. Dog became visibly frightened. May 10th, called me a manipulative liar. Apologized later, but pattern continues. June 6th, physical intimidation during conversation about therapy. None of it ever happened. Not a single moment. But it was written like a report. Cold, formal, matter of fact. The kind of language that sounds neutral but cuts your credibility apart in a courtroom. The final entry chilled my blood. If escalation continues, consider preemptive report for safety documentation. See attached for draft language. Attached. There was a separate file. Statement for officer draft. Docs. I opened it. She was preparing to report me. For emotional abuse. For manipulation. For erratic behavior and verbal hostility. She even included the bit about me being unpredictable during fertility treatments, painting me as some emotionally unstable husband who cracked under pressure and began exerting controlling behaviors. She didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to break me down so that when she disappeared with her new partner, the world would think she was the brave survivor of a toxic relationship. And worst of all, she knew how to make it believable. I was quiet, withdrawn, isolated from friends. She had set the scene perfectly, one where the public wouldn't even ask what happened because she had already written the answer. He was never who he seemed. I closed the laptop, walked to the kitchen, and gripped the counter until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't scared of losing her anymore. That part was dead. I was scared of losing me, the life I built, my job, my name, my sanity. But something shifted in me that night. A resolve I hadn't felt in years. She wanted to frame me? Fine. But I had my own timeline now. And it was more honest, more detailed, and about to become a hell of a lot louder than hers. In the days that followed, I moved like a ghost through the house. Silent, careful, invisible by design. I stopped reacting, stopped questioning. I smiled when she smiled, laughed when she laughed, and nodded through fake conversations about our weekend getaway. All the while, I was documenting everything. Every file I'd found, every forged timeline, every screenshot, every staged message, voice note, and draft report. I cataloged it all into a secure offline drive. I made backups. I even met with a lawyer, not one of our shared contacts, but a friend of a friend who specialized in digital evidence, reputation defense, and strategic exits. And then I made my quiet move. It started with the shared Dropbox account. I wiped it, not out of spite, but to lock her narrative. She couldn't edit what was no longer there. But I didn't delete the files entirely. I moved them into a private, encrypted folder I controlled. Then I logged into the shared bank account and separated our direct deposits. Clean. Legal. No confrontation. Then came the real nail. I filed first. I had enough. Emotional manipulation. Financial deceit. A pattern of infidelity and documented intent to slander. All of it laid out in quiet, dignified legal language that didn't need to scream to be devastating. When she was served, she was still in her robe, sipping coffee, tapping through emails, completely unprepared for the version of me that had finally woken up. At first, she played confused. "Wendell, what is this?" I looked her in the eye and said, "You told me I was wrong. That night on the rooftop. Remember?" She flinched, just slightly. "Well," I continued, "you were right about one thing. I was slow, but I'm not stupid." She stared at me like she was waiting for a punchline. But there wasn't one. Just silence. Peaceful, undeniable silence. The kind that only comes when you've already won and don't need to gloat. Over the next few days, she unraveled in small, jagged bursts. Tried to get emotional. Tried to reverse the roles. Claimed I was abandoning the marriage without warning. I didn't bite. I didn't yell. I didn't even answer half the time. Instead, I moved out. Temporarily, at first. Took the dog, found a short-term rental through a colleague's connection, and gave myself space to breathe without looking over my shoulder. The lawyer worked fast. The evidence was airtight. There was no case against me, just a series of manipulative half-truths that dissolved the second they were brought into daylight. When her drafted incident report came up during early mediation and my lawyer slid a folder across the table containing metadata, file origins, and a written statement from Allie, Rochelle finally stopped pretending. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just deflated, quietly, like a story that had lost its audience. In the end, she signed. No public scenes. No courtroom drama. Just signatures and silence, and a single, whispered sentence as we walked out of the office for the last time. You weren't supposed to beat me to it. I didn't answer. What was there to say? She didn't know it yet, but I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking into a life where I didn't have to perform anymore. Where I could breathe without waiting for the next lie to land. Where I wasn't the side character in someone else's script. And in that silence, I realized something else. I was free. Not broken. Not destroyed. Not humiliated. Just, finally, fully free.